So he again says that he's never cheated on Danielle and has also never stolen money from women because he wouldn't be in debt if he was. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's your girl JD here, back with another video, and today we are going to be diving into 90 Day Fiance the other way. This is the tell-all part 2. If you guys would like to check out part 1, I'll try to link it in the corner here. And let's just get right into it. So we left off in part 1 basically discussing Julio and Kirsten's breakup, their whole situation and ordeal that's been going on ever since the breakup. What was the reason for the breakup? All that good stuff. So they continue on to, play the recording that Julio said he had of Kirsten after she deleted the original recording that he had off of his phone of her having a conversation with one of her friends. He did have another conversation after she deleted that off of his phone. She had another conversation with Julio, and he records this when he kind of, approaches her about that conversation. It's kind of incriminating and awkward to listen to. And Kirsten still says that this is still and always has been only her friend, and she says that she just so happens to like to call him Poppy, and all of her other friends call him Poppy as well, but it is kind of strange to call your friend Poppy. In my opinion, I would not call my friend Poppy. Like, that's weird. That just kind of denotes like, I care about you. You my zaddy. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. She was also sending him photos of herself trying on a dress. So Tanya, she kind of comes in and she's like, well, I have a lot of guy friends. I send them photos and things like that. As long as it's not nude photos, I don't see a problem. But everyone else is getting on Kirsten because she lied about it to Julio. She kind of pretended like she didn't know what he was talking about. So that's the part where people were like, this looks kind of funny. So I kind of have to agree with everyone else. It's like, even though, yes, you do have male friends, and if you send like a couple of photos, it should be fine. It's the fact that you're lying about it. It's a little weird. Why lie, right? So they try to call this friend of Kirsten, the one that she calls Poppy, and he answers, but of course he says that they weren't really doing anything inappropriate, but no one believes him, okay, because there's nothing really to go off. There's no proof, like nothing. So Kirsten, because she, I feel, is kind of getting backed into a corner, she finally reveals that she and Julio had actually broken up because Julio had found another girl who he's now presently dating. So apparently the story is he was a DJ. I think this is maybe 2 months or so before Kirsten and him had broken up. And he was a DJ for a wedding or some event. I think it was a wedding though. And it was like a makeup artist, I think he said, that he ended up having a chat with. And according to Kirsten, he followed her on Instagram. They were chatting. And it's just a little weird that only a few months after you break up with Kirsten, you start dating this chick.
Found another girl. That is her name.
What?
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 Wait, what?
What?
It's a little weird. So other people were like, that looked kind of strange too. So now they're going on vacations together and dates and all that. So it is very questionable. Now there's a break in between after they finish talking to Kirsten and Julio. And Julio continues to try to persuade everybody, talk to the majority and kind of push this narrative that he's the innocent one. But I don't really believe any of them. I think both of them were doing stuff behind the scenes that were very questionable and inappropriate. So I think they were better off just breaking up at the end of the day. But yeah, I do think both of them were doing some stuff. Okay, now Kenny and Armando, so they're both debating on a move to Mexico City and also having a child together. And Armando was having a difficulty kind of committing to the move at first because of safety reasons and also their daughter Hannah finding a good school. But when it comes to the whole surrogacy journey, however, it has been really interesting for them. Apparently their egg donor, when she was supposed to come to the clinic, she ghosted and never showed up. And then Kenny, he starts getting emotional even talking about it. But now they have 7 embryos waiting, and now they just have to make the decision of how many they want to implant in their surrogate. So now they're kind of debating between 1 or 2, because if you do put 2 in, there's a chance that number one of them could fail, And there's also a chance number 2 that both of them can work and you now have 2 children. So it's like, ooh, well, what do we want to do? Because each time I think there's a different amount. I don't know. But either way, that's a lot of money. If it does fail, if you only put 1 in there and it fails, then you got to start this whole process over again. It's something that they really have to chat about. So there's a little bit of friction between Tim and Armando, because apparently Tim had told Kenny not to go through with having a child with Armando.
He told him, don't do it.
Yeah, I did say that actually a while back.
But in my opinion, I think it was really just because Tim wanted to have Kenny's interests at heart, because at the time Kenny just didn't really seem that sold on it. So as a friend, Tim's just like, well, don't do it if you're not sure. So Armando definitely kind of took that as like a, why are you trying to persuade him to not do what I want? But either way, Kenny, he goes on to say that Armando has been the one that has given him a new lease on life, considering, you know, his age and whatnot. Armando is kind of the one that has been really helping him to feel young again and just really kind of help him and push him to do things. So they also discuss Kenny taking Armando to a gay club in Mexico City, and Armando says in the show that he's crazier than you think. So they start going into what they would do in the bedroom, like the role-playing cops and robbers thing, and I was just like, okay, this is too much information. I don't need to know. But Sarper, because he is kind of like an amateur dancer, I guess, they start asking him like how his moves compared to the moves of the guy from the club, and Sarper ends up doing some weird dance moves, trying to teach everybody. Like he was doing some weird like stroking thing that he was like licking his thumb and rubbing it down his chest, and I was like, ew, cringe. I'm sure a lot of other people were like, what is going on? But let's move on to Danielle and Johan. So the last time they saw each other was actually 2 weeks ago. They had dinner together in his family's house, and Tanya, of course, wants to know why, much like all of us really, why, considering all he's done, that, you know, she's still kind of hanging around him. But Danielle says that she still cares about his family and still wants to make sure that he's okay, because obviously those feelings don't go away overnight. You still love the person. However, yes, there is a lot of damage that has been done.
Our day-to-day was so positive. The majority of our life was really beautiful, as long as I was funding it. So to see like all of these sides of him, it's upsetting to me because he doesn't have to be that way.
Now, of course, Sean does review all the scenes of Danielle and Johan's disagreements throughout the show. And one thing that sticks out is Johan's money problems. Those keep coming up this entire season. So he always brings up that his family never has enough money for food and he has to be the one to kind of pitch in and help. But then we see that each of his family members have numerous jobs and he's just the one that just doesn't want to work that hard. So they also go into his cheating and all the women he has in his phone that think they're his only girl. Apparently at one point Danielle said Johan definitely brought someone to their apartment that wasn't family for sure. Like she knows for a fact that it was not your family. He said it was his nephew, like his 20-something-year-old nephew, and I'm just like, that's not really believable to me, you know what I mean? Like that's a little weird. So according to Danielle, he has actually sent photos of his private areas to other women, which she has proof of because she can see his DMs because she helped him create the account. How dumb can you be? You know, it's just like, really? You already know she has a connection to your account. She can see everything you do. Why would you do that? Oh my god, some cheaters are just really woof. So he again says that he's never cheated on Danielle and has also never stolen money from women because he wouldn't be in debt if he was. I feel like you could always kind of be in debt or find your way into debt. I mean, look at the Vanderbilts, for crying out loud. Like, that's not funny, but how do you run through that much money? I'm going to be making a video about, you know, the Gilded Age. If you guys have been watching that show, I'm going to be making that video. But it's like, how do you run through that much money and then find yourself in, well, not in debt necessarily. They're not really in debt now, but nonetheless, it's very interesting that you run through so much. Like, how do you burn through so much wealth? You know, back to Johan, right? We find out that he's actually in debt from Danielle because he had taken out a $10,000 loan after they separated. That wasn't mentioned. So he says that it's Danielle's fault that he even had to take out the loan because she left him with a whole bunch of problems and a whole bunch of bills. So I don't know. According to Danielle, there was a page that he used to lure other women into his scam of sorts and to get money from them, allegedly. So she decided to go onto this page and pretty much repost the photo from his page, telling women to kind of watch out for him. And it was a little petty, don't get me wrong, but it kind of proves what she was saying, and it kind of proves it as true. So Armando, at the end of their conversation, he starts talking to Yohan a little bit, and Yohan blows up and pretty much tells everybody they can go to hell. I don't know how it escalated to this point, but yeah, they can go to hell because they are holding him accountable. Yeah. So let's move on to TJ and Kimberly. So we go back to them. We did mention them a little bit in part 1. Now, of course, we have to discuss the conflict that has been going on between Kimberly and TJ's brother Yash. In my other video that I made a little while back, I think I said another name because I couldn't remember his name, but it's Yash. So they bring up the argument scene, and Kimberly thinks ultimately that she handled herself to the best of her ability in terms of the situation. But TJ ultimately, when asked from the other cast members, like, you know, why can't you just figure out your ish, like take a side? And TJ's just like, no, I can't take a side because I just can't. Like, I can't choose between a family and my spouse. But at the end of the day, it's like Kimberly doesn't have anybody. She's coming to you to live with your family. So you kind of have to have her side and have her back. But at the end of the day, I do think that when it comes to Yash, that there is going to have to be some type of resolution. So Sean then asked Yash, do you believe Kimberly is a good wife for your brother? And he didn't really answer the question. He just tries to play peacemaker. But Armando directly asked Kimberly, is there anything that she regrets or anything that she wants to apologize for? And she just says her tone could have been better, that could have been different, but she doesn't really regret anything. Sarper, he then chimes in by saying Kimberly's temper is just too much for him. And also, when it comes to a woman, one side of her personality needs to be calming and soothing. And of course, everybody jumps on the part where he says for a woman, right? But the thing is, I do think that yes, men should be soothing and nurturing and all that stuff. However, I think naturally speaking, women tend to be more of that, if that makes sense, you know? So I get where Sarper's coming from, but at the same time, I do think that TJ could be a little bit more understanding when it comes to Kimberly and everything that she's been dealing with. So Yash ultimately thinks that Kimberly, at the end of the day, is making an effort. She's trying to have a relationship with TJ's family, and he also likes her as a sister-in-law. However, you know, he could very well be lying. We don't know. But Kimberly clearly is just like, oh, you know, thank you. But at the end of the day, you never know, because we're not in the house with them. So we don't know, you know? So let's move on to Wayne and Holly. They're going to be the last couple that we discuss in part 2. Holly has now been in the States for 4 months. Initially, she was only coming because her mom was sick, and then later on we find out that she was trying to deal with some credit card debt that she'd racked up while she was in South Africa, so she needed to pay that off. And now it doesn't really look like she has plans to move back to South Africa at all. So according to both of them, they have not spoken in about 2 or 3 weeks, at least longer than, you know, a few minutes in terms of a conversation. And Wayne kind of blames this on the fact that his phone battery is faulty and it keeps dying. So I'm like, okay, why don't you just get another phone? And someone also says that as well. It's like, just get another phone. It's not that serious. So Holly thinks that because of this, he might be doing some weird stuff. You never know. But Wayne feels as though she abandoned the marriage, and he doesn't even want to visit her in the US just to be with her. So I just find it interesting that you think she abandoned you, but yet at the same time, when she tries to make like some type of compromise and, you know, make it where you guys kind of work on something where you could go to the US and she could come to South Africa, like maybe until you get like a visa or something, because she's clearly not happy in South Africa. But at the same time, he just seems so stubborn and bent on staying in South Africa. But the thing is, at the end of the day, when it comes to your job, there's not really much you could do in terms of providing at the moment because your business isn't really doing that well. So why not leave? You know what I mean? It's not really making sense to me. However, I understand, you know, when it comes to uprooting your entire life, that could be a lot. I get it. Now, Kenny points out that Wayne doesn't really seem like the type of person to provide emotional support, and he just seems kind of annoyed by Holly all the time, which he really did in that very moment that Kenny said that. They actually did like a pan to Wayne's face, and he just kept rolling his eyes the entire time. Even Kalani was like, yeah, he is clearly annoyed by you. Like, look at his face.
Holly,
Yeah.
what did you think after listening to the conversation?
Like, you look very annoyed right now. We've been
Literally
having
rolling
to-
his eyes
to
at
deal
you
with
as you're
me.
saying your feelings.
One of their last conversations while she was in South Africa, they bring that up. And Wayne basically said that they shouldn't have gotten married. Now, he gives a little bit more context to that. And he says that he really just meant it in terms of if he knew that there was going to be so many problems and hiccups that they really just shouldn't have bothered getting married. However, it still sounded bad. It's just kind of like, oh, wow. You don't think we should have gotten married? Okay. So Holly takes that as, if you didn't love me, you shouldn't have gotten married to me. But clearly they're thinking about it in two totally different ways. But either way, it sounds bad. So Mary finally chimes in. She says something, and she says to Wayne that it seems like Holly loves him a lot, but he doesn't really seem to care about her as deeply. So Shekinah kept coming to Wayne's defense, trying to get Holly to realize that he's going through a lot as well, which I agree. If you're constantly calling someone just to complain about your problems, even with friendships, like that could be really problematic, and it could make that other person feel like what they have to say and what they're going through isn't important, and they have to run away from you almost to pour back into their empty cup a little. So maybe it's the fact that he doesn't really feel emotionally supported either. But when it comes to their personalities, they're clearly very different from each other. And yes, opposites attract. However, when they're a little too opposite from each other, it might not work out. And in this situation, I'm thinking it might not work out at the end of the day. Now, Holly is a lot more emotional than Wayne is. And he also says that he's coming home to a wife that's constantly crying and being emotional. And it's kind of emotionally draining for him because he's not really used to showing his emotion. So I get where he's coming from. And I also get why people were kind of coming after him a little bit, because they were like, well, even if you're a man, like you should be able to express yourself and, you know, talk. However, if you didn't really grow up with that and you haven't really been in that type of environment, it does get kind of difficult for you to do that if you're not used to doing it.
Wayne, do you see a future for this relationship?
Well, I did see a future like 3 weeks ago.
But what about now?
She hasn't been yet. I mean, I don't know.
So Kenny, at the end of it all, he says, you just have to sometimes put the other person before yourself. They're just ultimately in a very difficult and confusing and unsure place in their relationship and marriage. And even though I agree with Kenny when he said that to some extent, I think that in some ways, at some point, you should be able to be there for that person as well. They do have a lot of things coming up in part 3. Everything seems to be coming to a head with all the couples that have spoken already and ones who haven't really said anything yet. And apparently they invite one of the women that Yohan was fooling around with onto the show. So there's a lot going on. Okay, I can understand why TLC wants to separate this tell-all into so many parts. There might even be a part 4, because I'm not sure if everything that was kind of teased is in part 3. So we'll see. But y'all let me know what your thoughts are about this segment of the tell-all for 90 Day Fiancé The Other Way. Let me know in the comments. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.